So I'm Ramona Harding. I have the great good fortune to live part of the year in Canada, in Ontario, and the rest of the year in the woods here outside of Joplin. At this current point in time, I write the daily meditations for St. Paul's, and I also have authored several books. I guess the story of my faith journey as intersected with my writing goes way back. But I can remember sitting on the floor next to my 3-month-old daughter's crib, crying in the middle of the night, thinking I had no story to tell. I had not lived a life worth telling. Then I was nudged into a career as a speech pathologist where I spent my life convincing people to talk. And so I stepped away from that passion to write and into a passion to walk alongside people with disabilities to find their strengths and their gifts in life. I guess the piece that has sparked this journey into writing began with silence. And so about 12 years ago, I started sitting with women of different faith traditions in quiet. And so we would gather once a week, sometimes on the bridge over Shoal Creek near the nature trail, and sit for 30 minutes at a time, first chatting and then just drawing into silence. And it was at that time that I started feeling God moving in me for more. So I retired from my practice as a speech pathologist. I went to seminary, first at St. Paul's in Kansas City, and I started a journey of training as a spiritual director. And then along that same time, I happened to be in the Amazon and met my Canadian husband. And so then I transferred to a seminary in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I received a degree as a spiritual formation person. And so all that being said, I guess I want to reinforce the idea that journeys are never over, and that they have this delightful place of discovery alongside God. My creative process is rather structured in its unstructuredness. So, for example, when I am writing meditations, I receive, in Canada usually, a PDF of where the sermons are going. And so I first start in a place of quiet, just trying to clear me of me, because often I get in the way of me, and I feel like my process is a co-creative one. And so it's me being intentionally present with God, listening, but then I do some hard work. Often I will go for a walk, because it is walking that seems to be another way to clear me of me. And so I walk, and often I hear or know, and I will be on my phone recording what I heard and know, and then I come back and write. And I try always, not always very well, to frame them so that they, and this is another thing I always say, God, what is it that your children need to hear today? Because I feel like that's my call, is to speak and inspire someone, that it's not about me, it's God through me. And so I try then to write in a way that will speak to those people who hear God through their intellect, or who hear God through relationships, or who hear God through their instincts or their gut. I want to always not be speaking or touching only in the way that I hear and see and know God. And then often I will notice after I write, I will go back and reread it again. I'll be like, wow, where'd that come from? I have no earthly idea where that came from. And that's the reminder to me that I cleared me of me. Because if it's all about coming from my head, my heart, my gut, then I know that it wasn't God speaking, it was me speaking. I'm an Enneagram practitioner as well, and Enneagram helps you discover what your shadows are and your gifts are in God. And one of my shadows is my tendency to want everything to be perfect and to reflect me as perfect. And so I am most proud, humbly proud, that when I feel nudged by God to write something, that I say yes. I think anytime we try to define mystery, we're already entering a place of tension and ultimately a place of disconnect. And so I guess mystery for me, is that place of knowing the unknown, but never knowing the unknown. You know, I consider mystery to be a divine presence, and that throughout history, people like me have attempted to define using a limited vocabulary based on the words I have available to me that are shaped by the experiences that have been available to me, and then held in a larger culture that has placed layers of certainty over the vocabulary and the experiences that are available to me. So I think when I consider mystery, I first need to step back into, I guess, John. John said the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And I think then of the disciples who had Jesus with them and they still didn't get it. And I think of verses in the Old Testament that say, what is it about you that you don't even realize that the divine mystery is all around you, that it's in the stars, it's in the trees, it's in every created space, and you ought to notice it. And so I think mystery is the isness of the great I am. Mystery is the great isness of the great I am. And so there I rest. There I rest. I long to know in the same way that, I guess it was Paul who said, now we look through a glass darkly, and we will know even as we are fully known. And so that is my hope about mystery, is that I long to know, but today I can rest in my unknowingness. So I would say the function of my writing as a gift is all about purpose, plan and purpose. I think I mentioned earlier that I have this deep-seated feeling that within each of us who have been uniquely created, there lies at least one gift, right? So don't give up hope. You have at least one gift. And that for me personally, it is out of that realization, that tension. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, so it's very cruciform shaped. It's not this, it's this. It's the tension between, it's the intersection of my belovedness and my brokenness. And so all of my writing, my meditations and the 2 books that I have written are a product, a transformative result of that place of my belovedness and my brokenness. I wrote a book recently that I've self-published on Amazon, and it's called Living in Grace, Dying in God. And it is 6 stories that I've witnessed that are how people have lived and died well. And it's also practices for how you can connect more deeply with God, and practicalities for how you can accompany people who are dying. And so it's out of witnessing stories and then writing about the stories that I hear in spiritual direction that inform and then feel like an outpouring of grace. Remember, fruits of the Spirit, that's what they feel like. So my writing is a fruit of living. So this season of writing for me has shaped my perspective on family and priorities, on friends and purpose in a variety of ways. And I would say balance is the first word that comes to mind. Realizing that the center point is always God, but a lot of times I'm very messed up about where I put priorities. But it's also the realization to be here in the present, not always to be writing and thinking about something that's going to be published in the next year or in the next month, but to notice and be grateful for the gifts of the right now. Just like sharing my story with this audience is very much a gift of the right now. As a speech pathologist, I used to always write plans for people to achieve a goal. When I travel, I always am planning for what's going to happen next. But in contemplation, I am in the present space where I hope I'm not saying, oh, well, now what's for dinner tonight? Or, oh, back to God. Oh, well, then how about if I da 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 da? Oh, back to God. That place of quietude is exactly what it says. Inner stillness, noticing how God's feeling with me today, how I'm feeling with God, how I sink into the bark of that tree outside the window, or how I notice birds when I'm going for a walk. In a variety of ways, it's always noticing the presence of God, not just in this chair, but in you. I feel like the new window into understanding creation through my act of writing has been very specific in that I investigate ways that speak not just from words in books, but from all of sensory input frameworks, which most easily is accessible to everyone outside the walls of their home, outside the walls of a chair, or outside the internet, quite honestly. And so it has caused me to try to speak to ways people can discover God in new ways, like meditative walking, like paying attention as you walk, and find something that calls your attention, a rock, a stone, a flower, and then bringing that back and just sitting with it. Remember, I said this came back to me after a walk. I'd had a particularly difficult day of being mean to my husband, and so I brought this back as a reminder that my sharp edges wound people. So I find things outside that remind me. And so I would say, yes, creation speaks loudly to me through my writing.
Can you tell me about the book that you're holding?
Well, actually, we just came back to Joplin a week ago, and so I'm rediscovering the sacredness of this place. And my favorite books stayed my favorite Bible, my updated version of the Psalms, all the things I keep beside me when I write. Stayed in Canada because I traveled with just a carry-on. And so when I sat down here when we returned, this is actually called the Psalter, and one of the people I studied with in spiritual direction helped rewrite the Psalms, and it just fell open when I picked it up to this passage, and this is Psalms 40, and I feel like it speaks to my sense of the gifts of writing and inspiring others to want to know God more. I may cry. I waited and waited for God. At long last, God bent down to hear my complaint and pulled me from the grave out of the swamp and gave me a steady stride on rock-solid ground. God taught me a new song, a hymn of praise. Seeing all this, many will be moved to trust in the Lord. And I guess that's my hope, that in honoring my own story and witnessing the stories of people that I listen to in spiritual direction and companionship, as well as then speaking the words that I hear from God, that is my hope, that all those who have waited and waited for God and were pulled from the swamp, that will then hear a new song and be moved to trust in the Lord.
Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That's really good.
You're welcome.